I think in L&D, we have a misconception where people really think everybody needs to know everything about everything. And not only that, but an e-learning will fix it. One great idea can be great. That doesn't mean the business is ready for it. There's so much technology out there. If you're running a manual work, the first question you should ask yourself is, can technology do this for me?
This episode of L&D Disrupt is brought to you by How Now, the learning platform that actually makes learning matter. Because let's face it, you could push out loads of content, track skills in a spreadsheet, drown in admin, and still not know what's working. Or you could use How Now to connect your people to the skills they need. Deliver learning in the flow of work and prove it's making a difference. That's how modern companies like Depop, Trainline, Crunchyroll, SoEnergy, Forsaven, TomTom, Investec, and so many more do it. Learn more at gethownow.com.
Raquel, welcome to the show.
Hey, Nelson, thank you. Excited to be here.
Before we kick off, I do need to tell you a story, Raquel. So I need to tell you a story about how one time I was in Paris, I was meeting one of our customers in Paris, and we decided to stay at a Citizen M. And there is a guy who was working downstairs at Citizen M. He was incredible, super helpful. His service was great. And we were just asking him questions, not telling him that we're partners, but we're just curious to understand how things are going, and gave him feedback saying, mate, how do they train you and upskill you? And then he said, oh, we've actually changed. We've got this new platform. He gave us the name and he said, I could do this. It's really great. And I've got to say, I felt really warm and fuzzy inside, thinking it's quite good to see it out in the wild and someone hearing it without knowing how we're involved. And we never told him how we're involved, but it showed me two things. One, it's great to see that the platform getting the adoption and engagement, but also how effectively you had built this learning brand that was associated with the individual feeling like they could get better. He was glowing in reviews. It's the kind of thing you want someone to say behind your back. So firstly, on to you building that. And this episode really is diving into those things that make you so good at what you do and make your team so good at what you do. So let's start with, what's the common misconception about your role, right? Or what do you think people typically think they expect you to do, but actually you don't do that?
Yeah, that's a great question and great story. I'm happy to hear that this is happening as well on the floor. I think in L&D, we have a misconception where people really think everybody needs to know everything about everything. And not only that, but an e-learning will fix it. Why? Because it's scalable, it's a one-off, you just make it really good and people will know everything and they will spend time on it. So not really, I would say. And I think a second one that is also interesting to share is that people think that in L&D, we are experts of everything, which I understand why they think that. We do share learning and knowledge on all kinds of aspects, but it's not that we are experts on everything. So I think these are the two main things that I hear and see a lot that are expectations, internally and externally. I don't know if you share it.
Yeah, no, I definitely see it. That would make a great t-shirt. E-learning will fix it would make a great t-shirt to remind people it won't. What do you think L&D do need to be an expert in?
I think in L&D, we need to be experts in facilitating knowledge sharing and facilitating how can you really understand what you need. I think it's true, e-learnings are scalable. It's true, there's a lot of things we want our employees to know, understand, and do. But I think L&D needs to be able to support stakeholders on understanding what is it really that you need to bring to the people, in this case, on the floor. And something interesting about Citizen M is that we don't have like a person in the desk, we don't have a person at the bar, but rather they do everything. So they're quite lean teams. And yeah, let's be honest, they cannot learn everything about everything and know all of it quickly. So rather really understand what do we need to share with them and when. What's also super interesting is that people do want to share knowledge. The people from different teams, they do want to share, they do want to help others learn and grow, but they struggle with how to do it properly. And that's where we come in. We come in with identifying what are really the learning objectives, how do we make it practical, how do we make it valuable. And I think that's where we facilitate that knowledge sharing.
And this is one of the areas, Raquel, in the prep for this episode, and when we were talking to people and we were talking to some of the colleagues in our team who worked closely with you, and they've said that this is one of the areas that you've really been impactful, is driving this culture of knowledge sharing and getting your internal subject matter experts to contribute. Quite often when I speak to L&D professionals, this is hard, right? It's not an easy thing to do for different reasons. Sometimes I hear that the SMEs are busy, so it's hard to do. Sometimes it's because they feel like people want to hoard that knowledge and keep it to themselves and they don't want to share. What challenges have you seen and faced in trying to drive this culture of knowledge sharing, and what's really worked for you?
I think I would highlight two aspects. One is indeed time. I agree. I can see how you kick off a project with an SME, and then part of that kickoff is aligned on when to deliver what. So, for example, the raw content comes from the SME, and often, they get other priorities. The interesting part here is to really highlight to the SME as well, hey, but we are doing this upon your request because you think this is really important to the business. So in a very, setting expectations way, hey, we're more than happy to facilitate this knowledge sharing with you, but we have a dependency together. And so I think time and prioritization would be one. And the second one is what we would also call a little bit the expert effect. So I often spend a lot of time challenging back on, but where the level of the learners, how do we know what they know? We have this challenge where, of course, again, e-learnings are scalable, but then that also means you're reaching a lot of people with a different level of expertise. How do you coach the SMEs to navigate this? And then you make decisions or advices on, okay, we need to split this in different levels, or hey, let's start with easy learning and then follow up with a workshop, or we also know in person is much more valuable even. So it's also navigating with the SME what are the best ways to really get those learning objectives without falling in that expert effect when they start sharing this raw content that is way too complex or too complicated for what you really need. So I think time prioritization and the way you coach your SMEs to get the content where it needs to be, it's the main two challenges that we face.
And is there anything that stands out to you as when you were coaching the SMEs that, here are things that really worked when we were trying to coach the SMEs, right? Like we had a workshop or peer-to-peer. Was there something that you thought works much better than you had expected it to work in terms of coaching the SMEs?
I think bringing structure helps a lot. So what we put together is a template where the SMEs can actually follow through, and I can be quite strict into we're not moving forward until this part is clear. Like learning objectives need to be clear. What's in it for the business? What's in it for the people? Have clarity. What's the value that is bringing? Have clarity on the modular framework. I think when these templates came out, it really helped to set expectations. It really helped to bring more quality and purposeful learning experiences rather than people need to know this. Here's some material, make an e-learning. And in the end, this structure also helped us with being quicker actually, because you can also share it proactively with reviewers like, hey, in a couple of weeks, this is coming your way and this is what we're looking for. So I think that's what brought most value to SMEs, to bring that structure and expectations to the table. And then, of course, have some regular check-ins. The tool is only a tool, right? The template is only a template.
Yeah.
But I think that brought most value in our case.
And this kind of reminds me, Raquel, of a recurring theme whenever I was speaking to the team working with you. And the theme was working smart. right? This is the recurring theme that came about around working smart, not just yourself, but you and your team working smart. And I was curious to understand, what does it look like in practice? What does working smart look like in practice?
That's a great question. For us, working smarter really is about what is bringing value. What brings value to the business? What brings value to the learners? And for that, you really need to understand the challenge. So, of course, yeah, someone comes in with a challenge, can be the business, can be bottom up, doesn't really matter. But then the question is, what is really happening? Really try to understand instead of going through million solutions. Oh, yeah, the e learning. Sometimes they come to you with a challenge and a solution, and you're like, hold on a second, let's actually investigate this. So that happens. And once you get the challenge, I think there's so many tools out there to actually find out. So just work with whatever works best for you. So what I personally think is you have agile ways of working and that you should do for more innovation things. And you also have Lean Six Sigma, which I don't think it's being used a lot when it comes to L&D. I think there's potential there because it is about the mindset of continuous improvement. And even though, depending who you speak to, they're like two different religions, they have something in common, which is super important, and that's that customer centricity. Understand the learner, understand the business, understand what's happening. Spend more time in there than in logistics, than in manual work. No, I really think working smarter is, yes, finding the value for the business and the learners, but for L&D is also how can we use technology to automate, to get rid of the manual work. There's so much technology out there. If you're running a manual work, the first question you should ask yourself is, can technology do this for me? That's the very first question. And if it can, figure that out. Just spend half a morning on it, figure it out, and that's done. So then you can spend the rest of your time actually thinking on how can I innovate? How can I continuously improve? What do my people need? What do the business need? So it's much more, yeah, finding out on how can we work on the right things instead of working on a million things at the same time.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of actually product development, right? It's really a product mindset of you're building a product, you're obsessed about what the customer needs. And so I can definitely relate to this. And yeah, but I'll be interested to understand, how do when you're customer obsessed and you're customer centric, there's a lot of great suggestions that you're going to get from your customers, right? There's a lot of things, challenges that are going to come up to you. And I guess the next challenge for you in that is prioritizing, right? So what's your approach for prioritizing? Okay, that's great. This sounds like a good challenge. This sounds like a great suggestion. Where do you start? What do you do first?
Oof, that's a very good question. I think that's where you really need to take a step back and think globally what makes sense. So, what's high or low effort and what will bring high or low value? And that you do once again talking to the customer, also talking to the stakeholders, and trying to find out what makes most sense at the moment and also what the company is ready for. One great idea can be great, that doesn't mean the business is ready for it. So you also need to know a bit like the context, what are your resources, and try to understand what will bring most value. And a pilot always help. So just have that experimental mindset and pilot an idea, in our case in a smaller hotel, or not a smaller hotel but just a smaller team. So maybe start in a hotel instead of all hotels, start with maybe some mixed groups. It really depends on the product itself, but I think you really need to prove in a small scale before you go on a bigger scale and spend more budget and spend more time and etc. So I would argue, indeed, use that experimental mindset, have a hypothesis, prove it, it works, go ahead, grow global rollout. It doesn't work, great, you tried. Next up.
Yeah, yeah. It's ironic, right? Because that experimental mindset is key for learning. Yet quite often, that's what when I see in L&D teams who've got this kind of fear of failure and they don't want to experiment and stick to it, it's actually the very core ingredients that you need to learn and enable learning. If you don't have it, it's hard to role model that and make sure it exists across your culture. Do you find that in when you look across the L&D community, that it's not that common that people are willing to experiment and fail.
Yeah, I get that. And I do think there has been a shift. I think L&D community has been more open to just fail fast, learn fast, move on. And I think I also observe it in the L&D Agile teams. You see it more. We are an L&D Agile team and we do Scrum. And I also see that in the L&D community, like booming a bit more, also in the HR community as a whole. So I think what you say is very true. It's not only ironic because of the whole essence of learning and development, but also because we're dealing with humans. We're dealing with people. You are almost setting yourself up for failure anyways, because people change, things happen, context changes. So you need an experimental mindset. You need to be able to let go. You need to be able to try something new. You just, indeed, exactly what you said before about the product mindset. Think of design thinking, those social projects worldwide that are beautiful. Think about that. Think how that has taught people to just experiment more, bring more to the table, and be open for it.
I'd love to go a bit more deeper, Raquel, into the L&D agile approach that you practice, right? It's not often, to give you context, I think it's about three years ago or almost 4 years ago now, I wrote my book, Learning at Speed. And in my book, Learning at Speed, it really came from a place where I get to speak to a lot of L&D professionals on a day-to-day basis. And what I started to realize is a lot of them are aware of Agile and the Agile principles, but in practice, they didn't know how to convert that into day-to-day ways of working. And that's really what my book was trying to do, is give a more practical guide. So I'd love to hear from you. Like, you mentioned Scrum, right? Talk to me about, how do you use Scrum? And what were the challenges? Because there must have been challenges, right? Like, even bringing Scrum into a product and engineering team can be challenging. So I'd love to hear your experiences about bringing in Scrum and how that actually works.
Yes, for sure. Indeed, we implemented it a couple of years ago, and I've been the Scrum Master. And I think the biggest challenge is that you can tell Scrum is an IT born way of working, if you will. And we work a lot, or our dependencies are different than an IT team would have. You have a bug, you fix that bug, you either do it or don't do it. You have time for it or you don't have time for it. You have resources for it, you don't have resources for it. In L&D team is, I feel, I haven't been in an IT team myself, but I feel more complex than that. You have a certain, you have things that take more time. You have things that take more massaging the stakeholder, that takes more in-depth conversation, that takes more figuring out. And in Scrum, you are with a limited amount of time that you have to deliver a commitment. So I think finding that balance to really make Scrum work for us and not that we work for Scrum was the biggest pain. We had to really together discover what was the best way, what are the right amount of weeks, but that we're still following the Scrum guide. What is the right way to capture our commitments every sprint? How do we set goals? How do we make an acceptance criteria that is realistic, considering our stakeholders, yet ambitious? Because we also, of course, want to move forward and innovate and be better and deliver what's right. So I think that balance is something that took us some time to master. And I think what has helped us a lot is just coach each other and challenge each other. Hey, do you really think you can deliver this in this amount of time? And if you have a healthy conflict team, you can say very bluntly, Nelson, maybe you want to rethink this ticket because you are dependent on this person, and I know that this person has a conference next week. So shall we see how we help each other? Shall we challenge each other? And I think what has been fundamental is that challenging each other constantly. And the team also challenges me as the Scrum Master to find that balance, once again, where Scrum works for us and not the other way around. That has given the team so much structure. It has given the team a lot of clarity. Someone goes on holiday, you know exactly what's going on. So I would definitely recommend it.
And do you work out on like 2 week sprints, 4 week sprints? Has it changed much for you?
So we started with two, and now we're doing three. Throughout time, we realized two was a bit too rushed, maybe, also considering what we're sharing with the stakeholders. And then there was a point that, yeah, we were just not making our commitments. And then we realized, okay, this also doesn't make sense. It's okay to be lenient and say, okay, this ticket falls onto the next sprint because A, B, and C, but to what extent do you want to be lenient when you can give yourself the flexibility to really make it work for you? So now we do 3 week sprint. That works better. And what we also learned is that, yes, of course, you have your planning session where you talk about the next 3 weeks, but before that, at least a week before the planning session, take some time to review what's coming so you can see how realistic is it with your stakeholders, with whoever you need, with your resources. So we do have a refinement session where we look at our tickets and we just check, do we need to do something in preparation to the planning? I think that has been key, also because we have a team like many L&D teams that also have workshops, that also have like moments of facilitation. Oh, we have to go to that university, we have to travel to that hotel. So you also need to keep those resources in mind. And as a team, it's so important to be aligned on that, to know like where everybody's moving, what's happening, how can I support you? Hey, Nelson, I see you have this commitment, and I also see that you are traveling up and down. So let me know how I can support you.
Yeah, it's amazing just hearing you talking about tickets, Raquel. It's like I'm talking to my product and engineering team. It's incredible. But it also, I've got to appreciate where sometimes I think it's understated how many different multidisciplinary skills you need to have to be effective in your role in L&D. You're talking about being a Scrum Master while also thinking like a marketeer to build your learning brand, whilst also having to be an L&D expert to make sure you're enabling these internal subject matter experts. Like, it's an incredibly diverse range of skill sets that's come together, and it's incredible to see that. I want to change track a bit to one of the feedback that really stood out, my opening story. The gentleman I met in the Citizen M in Paris was this theme of he was seeing what he needed to see. So relevance, right? He was talking about relevance. And he literally pulled out his phone and showed me how quickly he can do it, because yeah, he must have reflected upon that experience to go, what a strange guest who is asking me very weird questions about learning. But one day I'll let him know why I asked those questions. But the themes of relevance and easy access came through there. That seemed to be why you were getting that adoption and engagement. So talk to me about how you've made that possible and what were the challenges in getting to that point?
Yeah, indeed. So when I arrived to CSNM, the very first thing was like, we need to innovate the learning offer. We need to find out how we can, yeah, get better in our learning offer. And after some investigation, of course, getting into the role, I came up with the most important things, and that is relevance, accessibility, and scalability. These were the three things that we really needed to get right to, yeah, be where we are today, and work in progress, of course. Relevance. So what we meant then was the learners really need to understand, why is this important for you? As a business, we know, yeah, you need to know A, B, and C because that will have an impact on D, E, and F, right? But the people who are working on the floor, they really need to understand, why am I doing it? Why do you want me to learn this? Why do you want me to learn this now? Like I said at the beginning, everybody needs to know everything about everything and quickly. Do they, and to what extent? So if the learners, and that was one of the feedbacks we got, indeed, I'm okay doing this learning, but why do I have to do it? And why do I have a deadline? So that was also an important one that we were asked a lot, like, why do I have a deadline? I don't have time for it now. Can I not do it later? So they really need to understand why it's important for their growth. Why is it important for their role? Why is it important in time-wise? So all these things are something that we start all our products with. What's really in it for you? Regarding accessibility, of course, our hotel team members, not everybody has a laptop, which makes sense. Why would you? You are there to connect with the guest, and that's really what you're there for, to connect with the guest, to give a great guest experience. And a laptop would only deprive you from that. So that makes a lot of sense. However, you have all these learnings we expect you to do. So in our previous LMS, we did not have the app. It was not really user friendly. We have mobile citizens, they can learn anywhere, anytime. And now with How Now, of course, as you're sharing as well in Paris, they can. And that's so important. So it's not only what's for you, but also that you can do it anywhere, anytime. And scalability is coming back a little bit with the SME conversation we had before. We say think global, act local. So we also have like more regional SMEs, if you will. And that is also part of scalability. It's also part of like really reaching the different points you need to reach as a global company. So these were our three main things. I think what I just would like to add in terms of accessibility and relevance is also for the leaders. And this is also something that was super important when we got How Now, that we needed leaders to be able to support their teams in their learning experiences. And for that, it was important for them to know where their team members were. In the previous LMS, they had to reach out to us to find out, like, hey, how is my team doing with this journey? Can you send me the completion rates? Who in my team is still missing? And of course, we happily do that. But then again, if technology can do that for you, please let it. So How Now gave direct access, dynamic access to the hotel leaders, who we call hotel managers, to any moment, anywhere. They can just go in How Now and say, okay, so here's where my team, this is how can I support. This person just finished this e-learning or this workshop. Let me go and ask how was it. Let me go ask triggering questions for that engagement and reflection moment to happen and really encourage them. So that was also something that was super, super important in innovating our learning offer.
Raquel, this conversation has just been super practical, useful, and tactical. I'm sure people are sitting there listening, going, "There's so much I can take away and put into it today." I know I need to leave you, but before I leave you, I'd love to ask you one question, which is, what's one thing you think, as an L&D listener today, or even we get many people from who are heads of HR and heads of people listening, what's that one thing they should stop doing today? And what's that one thing they should start doing today?
Ask yourself, can technology do this for me? If the answer is yes, stop doing it. You'll be surprised if you just really ask that question to yourself and then spend half a morning, like I said, to figure out how technology can do that for you, and that's done. Start doing, adopt the experimental mindset. What is safe enough to try? Go for that pilot. There are a million tools out there, design thinking, continuous improvement, agile ways of working, you name it. Find the one that works for you, make it work for you, not the other way around, and really understand what is it that the learner and the business needs. What is it that will bring value to the L&D team as well? That is something we often forget. How can you reduce steps? How can you connect more with your people? How can you innovate? How can you improve? I think these are the two what to stop, what to start today.
Raquel, I've absolutely loved this conversation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you for having me.
This is how we learn now.
This episode of L&D Disrupt is brought to you by How Now, the learning platform that actually makes learning matter. Because let's face it, you could push out loads of content, track skills in a spreadsheet, drown in admin, and still not know what's working. Or you could use How Now to connect your people to the skills they need. Deliver learning in the flow of work and prove it's making a difference. That's how modern companies like Depop, Trainline, Crunchyroll, SoEnergy, Forsaven, TomTom, Investec, and so many more do it. Learn more at gethownow.com.